The rejection papers were already signed. Everyone in the Grand Hall believed the Omega had lost everything. They did not know that the Alpha King was about to reveal a truth hidden for generations. The silver bells of Silver Moon territory echoed through the ancient ceremony hall as hundreds of werewolves gathered beneath the glow of the full moon. It was supposed to be a celebration of destiny, a moment when a mate bond brought two souls together and secured the future of a family. But for Emma Carter, it became the moment when the world watched her heart quietly break. She stood at the center of the hall, holding herself with calm dignity while the person who once promised to stand beside her placed the rejection papers before the elders. Nathan Whitmore, the alpha who had been chosen as her mate, looked at her with a confidence that came from believing he had made the right decision. Around them, whispers moved through the crowd. Some felt sympathy. Others believed the rejection was proof that Emma was never meant to belong among the powerful. For years, Emma had heard those same doubts. She had been called an ordinary Omega. She had been overlooked because she came from a simple family without influence or a prestigious name. People saw what she did not have, but they never noticed what she carried inside. Emma had always been different from the Omegas who sought attention or approval. She did not dream of status. She did not want admiration from those who looked down on her. She simply wanted to live with kindness and honesty. Even when others ignored her, she continued helping her neighbors. Even when people judged her, she chose compassion instead of anger. She believed that a person's value should never depend on whether someone else recognized it. But standing in that hall, hearing the rejection become official, Emma felt the weight of every moment she had been told she was not enough. She lowered her eyes for only a second, allowing herself to feel the sadness, then lifted her gaze again. She would not let one person's decision erase everything she knew about herself. What nobody in the hall understood was that Emma's story had never been as simple as they believed. There was a reason strange things had followed her since childhood. There was a reason some ancient symbols reacted differently whenever she entered sacred places. There was a reason her family had protected certain secrets for generations. But Emma herself did not know the truth yet. She only knew that the life she expected had changed forever. Far away from the ceremony crowd, the most powerful figure in the werewolf realm received news about what had happened. Alexander Blackthorne, the Alpha King, rarely involved himself in the personal affairs of other territories. He had witnessed countless alliances, celebrations, and broken bonds throughout his years as ruler. Yet something about this rejection felt different. The moment he heard Emma Carter's name, a strange feeling stirred within him. It was not curiosity alone. It was the sense that an important truth had been hidden from the world. While Silver Moon territory believed they had witnessed the end of Emma's place in their society, destiny was quietly preparing a different beginning. The Omega everyone had dismissed was not losing her future. She was walking toward the moment when the entire kingdom would discover who she truly was. The morning after the ceremony arrived quietly in Silver Moon territory, but the whispers surrounding Emma Carter traveled faster than the rising sun. The rejection papers had become the only thing many people wanted to discuss. Some spoke about the Alpha who walked away from his bond. Others spoke about the Omega who had been left without the future everyone expected her to have. But Emma did not allow the voices around her to decide who she was. She returned to the small home where she had spent most of her life, carrying the same calm spirit she had always shown. The world around her had changed overnight, but Emma remained the same person. She still prepared meals for elderly neighbors. She still checked on families who needed support. She still offered kindness without expecting anything in return. For Emma, being rejected did not mean she had lost her value. It only meant she had been forced onto a different path. Yet deep inside she could not ignore the questions that followed her. Why had the bond chosen her only to disappear? Why had she always felt different from other Omegas? And why had her family always avoided talking about certain parts of their history? Emma's mother had always told her that some truths were revealed only when the right moment arrived. As a child, Emma never understood those words. Now, after everything that happened, they felt more important than ever. Meanwhile, far from Silver Moon territory, Alexander Blackthorne studied the reports delivered to the royal palace. The Alpha King was known throughout the realm for his ability to remain calm in every situation. He rarely allowed emotions to influence his decisions. But the information about Emma Carter continued to capture his attention. Something about the rejection did not feel natural. The ancient records of the werewolf realm described rare situations where a bond could be hidden beneath layers of forgotten history. These cases were never about weakness. They were about secrets waiting for the right time to be revealed. Alexander had spent years studying the traditions of the kingdom, and he knew that appearances could sometimes hide the greatest truths. The more he learned about Emma, the more he realized that the story people were telling was incomplete. They described her as an ordinary Omega. They described her rejection as a simple choice. But Alexander believed there was more behind it. One evening, Emma visited the old forest path near her village, a place where she often went whenever she needed peace. The quiet surroundings helped her remember that her life was more than one painful moment. As she walked beneath the trees, she noticed an unusual feeling in the air. The same feeling she had experienced near ancient places since she was young. She placed her hand over the small symbol hidden beneath her clothing, a mark her family had always told her to protect. She never knew its meaning. She only knew it had been passed down through generations. At that same moment, miles away, Alexander felt a strange connection that he could not explain. The Alpha King looked toward the distant horizon, realizing that something hidden for many years was beginning to awaken. Emma believed she had lost her place in the world. Alexander believed he was searching for an answer. Neither of them knew that their paths were moving toward the same truth. The Omega who had been rejected was not forgotten by destiny. She was connected to a secret that could change everything the kingdom believed about rank, power, and belonging. The days following Emma Carter's rejection revealed a truth that few people in Silver Moon territory wanted to admit. The Omega they once ignored was carrying a quiet strength that could not be erased by a single decision. While others focused on the rejection papers and the rumors surrounding them, Emma focused on understanding herself. She had spent her entire life feeling different, and now she finally began searching for answers. The old family records stored in her home had always been protected, but after everything that happened, Emma felt she could no longer ignore the questions that followed her. Late one evening, she opened a small wooden box that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside were old letters, faded symbols, and a piece of history that her family had carefully guarded for generations. Emma did not find a complete explanation, but she discovered something that changed the way she viewed her past. Her family had never considered her ordinary. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to tell her the truth. The symbols connected to her bloodline were not signs of weakness. They were reminders of a forgotten legacy. Emma sat quietly as she read the old writings, realizing that the people around her had judged her based only on what they could see. They saw an Omega without influence. They never saw the history hidden beneath her name. Meanwhile, Alexander Blackthorne continued investigating the unusual circumstances surrounding Emma's rejection. The Alpha King had access to the oldest archives in the werewolf realm, records that contain forgotten traditions and lost knowledge. As he searched through the ancient documents, he found references to a rare rank that had disappeared from public memory. The writings described someone who would not be recognized through wealth, family connections, or social status. Their true position would only be revealed when the right person discovered the truth. Alexander became more certain that Emma's story was connected to something much greater than a simple broken bond. He decided to travel to Silver Moon territory himself. The decision surprised many within the royal court. The Alpha King rarely left the palace for personal matters, and even fewer situations were important enough to receive his direct attention. But Alexander knew this was not only about Emma. It was about correcting a misunderstanding that had been allowed to continue for too long. When Alexander arrived in Silver Moon territory, Emma was surprised to see him. She expected questions or perhaps judgment from someone of his position. Instead, she saw a calm and thoughtful leader who seemed more interested in listening than speaking. "I have heard many stories about what happened," Alexander said. "But I believe there is a truth that has not been discovered yet." Emma looked at him carefully. She had spent years hearing people tell her who she was supposed to be. She was not ready to believe another person could see something different. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked. Alexander looked toward the ancient symbol she carried. "Because some things that are forgotten are not lost. They are simply waiting to be recognized." His words stayed with Emma long after their conversation ended. For the first time since the rejection, She felt that someone was not looking at what she lacked. He was searching for what had always been there. Neither Emma nor Alexander knew the full truth yet, but destiny had already begun connecting their paths. The Omega who believed she had lost everything was about to discover that the rejection had only opened the door to a much greater revelation. The arrival of the Alpha King in Silvermoon territory changed the atmosphere of the entire region. For years, the people had believed they understood Emma Carter's place in their world. They saw her as an ordinary Omega whose story ended the moment the rejection papers were signed. But now the most respected leader in the werewolf realm had come personally to uncover the truth behind her forgotten history. Emma found herself surrounded by questions she never expected to answer. She had spent so much time accepting how others viewed her that she struggled to believe there could be something more hidden beneath the surface. Alexander Blackthorne noticed her uncertainty, but he did not pressure her. Unlike those who judged her without listening, he gave her the space to understand her own journey. Together, they returned to the old family records that Emma had discovered. The writings were incomplete, but they contained clues about a rare lineage that had been removed from common knowledge. The ancient symbols connected to Emma were not marks of an ordinary Omega. They represented a rank that had once held a special place in the history of the werewolf kingdom. Alexander carefully studied the records, comparing them with the royal archives he had carried from the palace. The more information they uncovered, the clearer the truth became. Emma's rejection had not happened because she lacked value. It happened because nobody understood what she truly carried. For generations, her family had protected the secret because they believed revealing it too early would bring unwanted attention. They wanted Emma to grow up knowing kindness and humility before learning about her true place in history. Emma struggled with the discovery. Part of her felt relieved because it explained the strange moments she had experienced throughout her life. But another part of her wondered if people would only respect her because of a title. She looked at Alexander and asked, "If everyone learns the truth, will they finally see me, or will they only see my rank?" Alexander remained silent for a moment because he understood the meaning behind her question. He had spent years as the Alpha King surrounded by people who respected his position, but did not always understand him as a person. "A title can change how people look at you," he said gently. "But it cannot create the person you already are. Your actions showed your worth long before anyone knew about your history." Those words stayed with Emma. For the first time, she realized that her hidden rank was not the reason she deserved respect. It was simply another part of who she was. Meanwhile, rumors began spreading throughout Silvermoon territory. Some people who had once dismissed Emma started questioning whether they had misunderstood her. Others struggled to accept that the Omega they ignored could hold such an important secret. But Emma did not focus on their opinions anymore. She had spent too many years trying to prove that she was enough. Now she was beginning to understand that she never needed permission to have value. As the moon rose above the territory, Alexander and Emma stood near the ancient forest where her family had protected their history for generations. The Alpha King looked at the path ahead and knew the truth they discovered would soon change the entire kingdom. But before the world learned Emma's true rank, he wanted her to understand something even more important. She was never valuable because of what she would become. She was valuable because of who she had always been. The truth hidden within Emma Carter's bloodline was no longer just a forgotten family secret. It had become a discovery that could change the way the entire werewolf kingdom understood rank and destiny. Yet even with the answers slowly appearing, Emma remained the same person she had always been. She did not suddenly see herself as more important. She still walked through Silvermoon territory with the same gentle heart, speaking with villagers, helping families, and treating everyone with respect. Alexander Blackthorne noticed that more than anything else, the Alpha King had met many powerful figures throughout his life, but very few people carried strength without needing recognition. Emma's humility was exactly what made her different. Inside the royal archives of Silvermoon territory, Alexander continued studying the ancient records connected to Emma's lineage. The documents described a rare rank that had existed long before the current traditions of the werewolf realm. It was not a position created by wealth or influence. It was a role connected to responsibility, balance, and the ability to unite different parts of the kingdom. The records explained that this rank would remain hidden until the person carrying it showed the qualities needed to protect its meaning. As Alexander read those words, He understood why Emma's secret had remained unknown for so long. Her value had never depended on the title she carried. Her actions had already revealed the person she was. Emma listened quietly as Alexander explained what they discovered. She expected to feel excitement, but instead she felt a mixture of emotions. She thought about all the years when people looked at her and saw only an Omega. She remembered the moments when others assumed they knew her future, before she had the chance to choose it herself. "I spent so much time wishing people would see me differently," Emma said softly. "But now I wonder if I was waiting for the wrong thing. Maybe I should have believed in myself first." Alexander looked at her with respect. "That is the reason this truth belongs to you. Someone who seeks power would not understand its responsibility. Someone who values kindness will." His words reminded Emma that her journey was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about accepting every part of herself. Meanwhile, news about the hidden lineage began reaching the leaders of nearby territories. Some were curious. Some were uncertain. The idea that an overlooked Omega could carry such an important legacy challenged beliefs that had existed for generations. Many had built their understanding of rank around appearance, family name, and influence. Emma's story showed them that those things could never reveal the complete truth about a person. Nathan Whitmore also heard the rumors spreading throughout the region. The confidence he once had began to disappear as he realized the decision he made had been based on assumptions, rather than understanding. But Emma no longer looked toward the past with anger. She had moved beyond the need for anyone's approval. Her future was no longer controlled by the person who rejected her. It was shaped by the person she had always been. As the Alpha King prepared to reveal the truth before the kingdom, he knew the announcement would not only change Emma's life, it would challenge every belief that had caused people to overlook her. The world was about to learn that the Omega they dismissed was never ordinary. She was simply someone whose true story had not yet been told. The day of the royal gathering arrived beneath a clear sky above Moonfall Kingdom, and everyone knew that an important announcement was coming. Leaders from different territories traveled to the Grand Hall, not because they expected a celebration, but because they wanted answers. For generations, the werewolf realm had followed traditions that defined people by their rank, family, and reputation. Now, those traditions were being questioned by the discovery surrounding Emma Carter. Emma stood beside Alexander Blackthorne, feeling the weight of countless eyes watching her. She remembered standing in the same kind of hall before, when people looked at her with doubt and believed they already knew her worth. But this time felt different. She was no longer standing there as someone waiting for acceptance. She was standing there as someone who finally understood herself. Alexander stepped forward and addressed the gathering. His voice was calm, but every word carried the authority of the Alpha King. He did not speak about Emma as someone who needed to be protected. He spoke about her as someone whose truth deserved to be recognized. He explained the history behind the forgotten lineage, and revealed that Emma carried a rare rank connected to an ancient responsibility within the kingdom. The room became silent as the truth reached everyone who had once judged her. Many struggled to understand how they had overlooked someone so important. But Alexander made one thing clear. Emma's value did not come from the rank being revealed. The rank was discovered because of the value she had already shown through her actions. Emma then stepped forward, not with pride or anger, but with the same kindness that had defined her entire life. She looked at the people who had doubted her and spoke with honesty. "I do not want anyone to respect me because of a title. I only hope we can learn to respect each other before we know someone's position." Her words surprised many because they expected someone in her place to demand recognition. Instead, Emma offered understanding. She reminded them that every person carried a story that others might never see. Alexander watched her carefully and realized once again why destiny had connected their paths. Emma was not powerful because of her hidden rank. She was powerful because she never allowed the world to take away her compassion. As the announcement continued, some leaders began reflecting on the mistakes their own territories had made. They remembered the people they had ignored because they did not fit traditional expectations. Emma's story became more than a personal revelation. It became a lesson for an entire kingdom. Even Nathan Whitmore, who stood among those listening, could no longer ignore the truth. The person he rejected was never lacking value. He had simply failed to recognize it. But Emma no longer needed his regret to move forward. Her journey had already taken her beyond that moment. Later that evening, Emma and Alexander walked through the palace gardens beneath the moonlight. The kingdom was beginning to change, but both understood that true change would take time. "Do you think people will really see things differently now?" Emma asked. Alexander looked toward the lights of the kingdom. "Some will change quickly. Others will need time. But every change begins when someone chooses to show the truth." Emma smiled softly. She had spent years wondering why destiny allowed her to experience rejection. Now she understood. The rejection was never the end of her story. It was the path that led her to discover who she truly was. The days following the royal gathering brought a quiet transformation throughout Moonfall Kingdom. The announcement about Emma Carter's true rank had reached every territory. But the most important change was not found in the words written in ancient records. It was found in the way people began to see each other. For many years, the kingdom had measured worth through family names, positions, and traditional expectations. Emma's story challenged those beliefs by showing that a person's true value could never be decided by appearances alone. Emma returned to her village, expecting life to feel different after everything that had happened. Instead, she found herself doing the same simple things she had always done. She visited families, listened to concerns, and helped those who needed support. The only difference was that now more people noticed what she had been doing all along. They no longer saw an ordinary Omega. They saw someone whose kindness had always carried a rare strength. Alexander Blackthorne continued his responsibilities as the Alpha King, but his leadership also began to change. Before meeting Emma, he believed that protecting the kingdom meant creating strong rules and making difficult decisions alone. Emma showed him another side of leadership. She taught him that a kingdom was not only built through authority, it was built through trust, understanding, and the willingness to listen. Together, they began encouraging new traditions that valued character over status. Young werewolves who once believed their future was limited by their rank started seeing new possibilities. Families began teaching their children that respect should be given before someone earns a title. The changes were gradual, but they were real. Not everyone accepted the new ideas immediately. Some elders still struggled to let go of beliefs that had existed for generations. But Emma did not try to force anyone to change. She simply continued living by the same values that had guided her before anyone knew her secret. Her patience became stronger than any argument. Her actions became more powerful than any announcement. One afternoon, Emma walked through the palace gardens with Alexander and looked across the kingdom below. The view reminded her of the person she had been before everything changed. "I used to think being rejected meant I was losing my place in the world," she said quietly. "Now I realize it was the moment that helped me find it." Alexander looked at her with admiration. He knew many people would have allowed pain to change their hearts. But Emma chose to remain kind even when kindness was not returned. That was the quality he respected most. "You never became important because the kingdom discovered your rank," Alexander said. "The kingdom discovered your rank because you were already someone worth following." Emma smiled, knowing those words carried the truth she had spent years learning. Her journey was not about proving others wrong. It was about understanding that she had never been the person they believed her to be. Meanwhile, stories about the Omega who changed the kingdom continued spreading beyond Moonfall. People spoke about her not because of the title she carried, but because of the compassion she showed. The Alpha King and the Omega became symbols of a new beginning, a reminder that destiny was not always revealed through power. Sometimes, destiny was hidden inside the person everyone overlooked. And as the kingdom entered a new era, Emma knew one thing for certain. The rejection that once felt like the end had become the first step toward discovering the truth she had carried all along. As the seasons changed across Moonfall Kingdom, the story of Emma Carter continued to inspire people who once believed they understood the meaning of strength. The kingdom was different now, but the greatest changes were not found inside the royal halls. They were found in the hearts of ordinary people, who began questioning the beliefs they had followed for generations. Emma noticed these changes during her visits to villages throughout the territory. Families who once avoided speaking with her now welcomed her with kindness. Young Omegas who had grown up believing they had fewer opportunities began seeing a future filled with possibility. Emma never asked anyone to admire her. She only wanted people to understand that every person deserved respect before they proved anything to the world. Alexander Blackthorne watched these changes with quiet pride. The Alpha King had always carried the responsibility of protecting the kingdom, but now he understood that leadership was not only about making decisions from a throne. It was about creating an environment where people could become their best selves. Emma had shown him that the strongest kingdoms were not built by fear or tradition alone. They were built by trust. One evening, Alexander invited Emma to the royal library, a place filled with centuries of records from the werewolf realm. He wanted to show her something that had been discovered among the oldest documents connected to her lineage. The pages contained stories about previous generations who carried similar responsibilities. They were not remembered because of their rank. They were remembered because they helped bring people together during difficult times. Emma read the words carefully, realizing that her hidden rank was never meant to separate her from others. It was meant to remind her of the responsibility she carried toward them. "I spent so much of my life believing I needed to prove that I belonged," Emma said. "Now I understand that belonging was never something others could give me." Alexander smiled. "That was the truth you knew before anyone else discovered it." Their conversation reminded Emma of how far she had traveled. She remembered the ceremony hall where she once stood alone, surrounded by people who believed they already knew her future. Now she stood beside the Alpha King, not because she needed someone to define her worth, but because they had found a partnership built on understanding. Beyond the palace, the kingdom continued adjusting to its new way of thinking. Some traditions remained, but many began changing. Leaders started considering character alongside position. Families started teaching younger generations that kindness and courage were not signs of weakness. Emma's journey became a reminder that hidden potential could exist anywhere. It could exist in someone without a powerful name. It could exist in someone who had been overlooked for years. It could exist in the person everyone believed had already lost. Nathan Whitmore eventually stepped away from public attention, understanding that his greatest mistake was not losing a connection with Emma. It was failing to see her value when she stood before him. But Emma no longer carried the weight of his decision. She had moved beyond needing anyone from her past to understand her. Her future was no longer shaped by rejection. It was shaped by acceptance of herself. As the moonlight covered Moonfall Kingdom, Emma and Alexander looked across the peaceful lands they had helped transform. They knew challenges would still come, because every kingdom continued to grow and change. But they also knew something more important. A world could change when one person chose compassion over judgment. And sometimes the person everyone overlooked was the one who showed everyone else how to see. Years after the moment that changed everything, Moonfall Kingdom continued to remember the journey of Emma Carter and Alexander Blackthorne as a story of hope, understanding, and transformation. What began as a painful moment of rejection became the beginning of a new era. One where people learned that a person's worth could never be measured by assumptions or appearances. Emma often thought about the day she stood in the ceremony hall and believed her future had disappeared. She remembered the silence of the crowd and the feeling of being judged before anyone truly knew her. But looking back now, she understood that moment differently. It was not the day she lost her place in the world. It was the day she started discovering who she truly was. The Omega who had once been overlooked became someone who inspired countless others. She never used her hidden rank to place herself above anyone. Instead, she used her position to create understanding between people who had spent generations separated by old beliefs. Her greatest strength was never the title connected to her name. It was the compassion she carried even when the world had not shown her the same kindness. Alexander Blackthorne continued leading the kingdom with a new perspective. The Alpha King remained powerful and respected, but those who knew him closely noticed the difference in his leadership. He listened more carefully. He valued the voices of people who had once been ignored. He understood that a ruler's responsibility was not only to protect traditions, but also to recognize when traditions needed to grow. Together, Emma and Alexander became a symbol of a new way forward. Their bond was not remembered because an Alpha King discovered an important Omega. It was remembered because two people helped an entire kingdom. Understand that true connection came from seeing another person's heart. The ancient records that revealed Emma's rank became part of history, but the lessons she taught became even more important. Future generations learned that hidden potential could exist anywhere. They learned that kindness could be a form of strength. They learned that someone who was rejected today could become the person who changed tomorrow. One evening, as the moon shined above the palace gardens, Emma and Alexander returned to the place where they had shared many conversations about the future. The kingdom below was peaceful, filled with people who were slowly building a better understanding of one another. Do you ever think about how different everything could have been? Alexander asked. Emma smiled as she looked toward the lights of the kingdom. I do. But I think every difficult moment brought us closer to the truth. Alexander knew she was right. Destiny had not brought Emma into his life because she needed to be rescued. It brought them together because they both had something important to learn. She taught him that strength without compassion was incomplete. He showed her that the world could recognize the value she had always carried. Their story continued beyond the palace walls, passed down not as a tale about rank or power, but as a reminder of something much greater. A person's value exists before the world recognizes it. A person's strength can be gentle. And sometimes, the person everyone chooses to ignore is the one destiny has been protecting all along.